You know where they are. I said, get out
of This is Appetite for Distortion.
Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode number 270. My name is Brando. Another episode you can watch on our YouTube channel, Zoom. It's amazing. Everybody and their mother since the pandemic knows how to use Zoom, but it's been fun. You got to meet people as opposed to just on the phone. So joining me today, I haven't seen his face in a while, MattyB, who you may remember Matty. You were my co-host with
Laura Jane Grace.
Yeah.
Against me. Yep.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Since we last spoke, I am now a father. So I've got that going. Daddy B. Yep, Daddy B in full effect. So he's getting big. He's not sleeping, but that's okay. That's my problem, not yours.
Mazel tov. And
thank you. I appreciate it. And I haven't had a chance to give you an official congratulations on getting engaged, Brando. So I want to say congratulations to you on that, sir.
Looking
forward to that invite. Okay.
I remember because I'm a New Yorker, and don't worry, Mistress Carrie, we'll introduce you too. Because Matty, we're roommates, and I went to his wedding. But I remember I was still on Long Island at the time, and he's like, "You're coming to Boston for my wedding. You have no excuse. You better be here."
Yep.
So I had no excuse.
Yeah. So well done.
And Matty from Cape Cod's Rock, Pixie 103.
Yeah. I took the. You didn't give me the opportunity to do video last time, so I'm like free plug. You know.
So Pixie in Cape Cod is where I started my on-air career at. I mean, I started it in college and on Long Island with the metal show, but I moved up to Massachusetts. I was a masshole for 2 years. I think I can say that with
you lived here. You were an asshole. You got to earn that.
and Matty introduced me to a lot of things. Moving to Cape Cod, some we can't talk about on the podcast, some of which we are going to, and that being just great radio and WAAF. You know, RIP was a great Boston area radio station.
It was an amazing station, Brando.
It really was. It was the New York version of K-Rock growing up, and didn't really have that in New York. So I found even when I would go home back in Long Island, I would listen to WAAF. I loved it. And one of the reasons why I loved it is our guest for today, Mistress Carrie. So welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
It's so surreal because, I mean, it's more surreal for Matty, who's told me that he's been listening to you since you were an intern.
So I grew up listening to AAF. You know, mainly I started listening to the morning show and most specifically Opie and Anthony, because Opie and Anthony really got there. I would say they cut their teeth really at AAF and made them what they ultimately became there. But around that time, there was this intern floating around that was doing anything and everything, and intern Carrie kept coming up over and over again, and you know, all these years later she rode that ship, you know, went down with it. So
rode it right into the ground, baby.
It was amazing. It was an amazing run.
29 years. Those internships, you know, they're invaluable to be able to go and learn the business from the inside out. So I started interning in 91, got on the payroll in 94 in the promotions department. And then the aforementioned Opie and Anthony getting fired in early 1998 is what opened up a full-time slot on the air. And so I thank those guys all the time for getting fired. It was the best career move for me ever.
A couple Long Island guys. Yeah.
Yep.
But what you've done now, and I'm so happy that I get to speak with you on kind of an upswing now of your career, because much like it's happened to stations in New York, it's radio is changing. Well, we'll use that word. So AAF was bought out by a Christian station, I guess.
Well, what happened was there, because you need to clarify, there's a difference between WAAF, the entity, and 107.3, the broadcast signal. The broadcast signal is what got sold off. The radio station entity and identity is still retained by Odyssey.
Okay.
And it still streams but there's no DJs or anything. It's just a streaming online radio station. But what they consider intellectual property of WAF, the logo, like all of that kind of stuff still exists and is still owned by the company. But 107.3, the terrestrial broadcast signal, is what got sold off to Christian radio.
Okay. Because I would show you, but I'm glad maybe I can't show you because I would get sued. And I have the, Matt, you gave it to me. It was an old GN'R bumper sticker of WAAF. It's like on my.
Yeah, we made a bunch of those. Those commemorative stickers. You know, our old marketing guy, Adam Ralston, who was with the station multiple times, talking about a guy that started as an intern and he, as far as I know, is the one holding the archive of like the most commemorative stickers. He and I have been working together to try and have one place where the most of these stickers are kind of put into a collection. And I had a few that he didn't have. And there's a lot of those Guns N' Roses stickers because they were such a huge band for us for such a long time.
I was actually telling a coworker yesterday how when I was on the street team at WAF, I was responsible for the rock bus one day, and I had to go out to this garage in the middle of the middle of the woods to get it, and I stumbled upon boxes and boxes of stickers and T-shirts, and you better believe I pilfered a bunch when I was out there. So I actually have like a stack, probably like 20 maybe at this point, of old Mistress Carrie, the round ones with with the barbed wire around it. Yeah.
Yes, so, I love those stickers.
So there's just a bunch of that stuff still out there.
Oh, I love it. I wish I didn't use it. You know, I wish I just had it as more of like a collectible, but I guess that's what stickers are for.
Any, I'll save them for you if I come across any, because I was kind of a hoarder at my time at AAF. I saved a lot of stuff, and then, you know, the last week of the radio station, I kind of took everything but the paint off the wall. So I got a lot of cool stuff. So if I come across any, I'll make sure you get some. But
you have a great setup now. No stickers around you. And I want you to
they're all on my desk around there. This is MCHQ. So this is my new personal studio now that I built during the lockdown. And what you can't see is the desk that all of the equipment sits on is made to look like stacked road cases backstage at a concert.
Oh, that's cool.
It was actually built by a road case company called Image Custom Cases. And they were amazing because they really slowed down during the pandemic, and they were like, hey, you know, let us help you build your studio. And so the desk that all of my equipment is built on, I wanted to plaster it with stickers so it looks like a real authentic road case. And so there's a sticker all over it. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Are there pictures online of your studio? Have you done that? Or is it too secret?
There may be some. I'll have to go and dig up and see if I put any, because for a long time it was under construction. So I didn't want to put pictures up, and now that it's, you know, pretty much finished and decorated and soundproofed and whatever, and it's a really comfortable place to work, and it's the cleanest studio I've ever worked in. Matt will be able to tell you the old AF studio was like a petri dish of science sample.
I slept on that love sack a couple of times.
You are a brave man, because I know what happened on that love sack, and I wouldn't have sat on it. So,
yeah, well, you know.
So having the studio, I can control how clean it is and who sits on the couch. So it's good.
I think there's a lot of radio studios. I know, I've been there. You control who comes in and who comes out.
Yeah,
that's why it's awesome that you started the Mistress Carrie podcast, which has been extremely successful right away. You just interviewed Chris Daughtry.
Yeah, it's almost a year old. June 10th of 2020, the first episode debuted. So I can't believe that it's been a year. I can't believe it.
It's tough because coming from, I'm obviously a radio person as well, to do a podcast, it's like there's no format. It's just kind of like the Wild West. So did you find that transition difficult? Because obviously you're very seasoned in interviews, but now you're really doing all of them in long form as opposed to on the radio.
I mean, I'm having the conversations I always wished I could have.
Exactly. Sure.
Normally in radio, you get access to an artist, you know, you get what they call a phoner, which is like a 10-minute call to talk about the record, the tour, when tickets go on sale, and then move along, unless the band actually was coming into the studio, and then you could have them for longer. But then you always had to interrupt the conversation because of commercials, or you wanted to play some music. And so in some ways, the podcasting, it was so easy because I just didn't have to stop the natural flow of the conversation, The only thing, and I know that as podcasting progresses and moves forward, that this is going to change, is I would love to be able to put songs into my podcast.
Sure.
And you can legally only put snippets in it right now for licensing purposes. But as podcasting grows and as the technology grows, they're going to work that stuff out.
Yeah.
And when they do, and people can do a long form podcast episode with music embed, like full songs in the show.
Game changer.
Game changer. Yeah. So that was the only difference for me, was just on one hand, I was happy that there was nothing interrupting the interview. But on the other hand, when we're talking about a song, sometimes it would be really nice to be able to go, well, let's play the song and we'll come back and keep talking about it. And I can't do that right now.
Yeah. Oh,
But I'm not complaining. I love it. I love it.
But you're also back on the radio, which is amazing. And this is the name that I saved to say on the air because I remember when I mispronounced it the first time and Matt couldn't stop laughing because I couldn't pronounce where Matt was initially from. Stoughton. It's Stoughton. I got that down. But I used to call it Worcester.
Oh,
I know it's
Worcester.
Worcester. I know it's Worcester now.
yeah.
I was like,
There's
we saw the Foo Fighters there. I'm like, we're going to see the Foo Fighters in Worcester.
Yeah, Foo
There's a
Fighters
lot
and
of
Against Me.
places in Massachusetts that people mispronounce, and that's why you don't get to call yourself a masshole, because
Okay.
until
Exactly.
you can get through all of these places and pronounce them all right, you
Fair
can't
enough.
be a masshole. So,
Fair enough.
yeah,
And
Worcester, kid, Worcester.
Worcester. I know. And I got to say this because Matt's wearing his Bruins hat. I've got my Islanders shirt on because it's Islanders Bruins tonight.
Yep.
Oh,
Game 3.
I know. Mr. Carrie, you're a big Sox. Are you? No, you're also you're.
I'm
all
a
sports, aren't you?
homer, and I'm
Yeah.
born and raised in Massachusetts. You know, what's really funny is that during the lockdown, like a lot of people, I started researching my genealogy and started researching my family history with my sister as like something to keep us occupied during the lockdown.
Okay.
And I can trace my family back in Massachusetts to 1670 right now.
Nice.
So when I say I'm a homer and I'm born and raised, there's one half of my family, my dad's half, that's immigrants, and that we can see where they came over, and that it was pretty recently. But then there's the other half of the family that is massholed to the DNA core because they got here and were like, never leaving. So when you grow up, it becomes part of you. And I've been a Boston sports fan when they lost all the time. So I don't mind being obnoxious about it when they win all the time, because I'll be a Pats fan long after Tom Brady's legacy is over, and I'll be a Sox fan long after. And same thing with the Bruins and the Celtics. It's like I grow up with it, and you cherish the wins because you stay loyal through the losses. That's just how it is. I think any great sports city, their fans are like that.
Yeah, I mean that's why I'm still rooting for the Islanders, who haven't won a championship since I was born.
This is the first time the Isles and Bruins have played in the playoffs since '83.
It's crazy.
Since I was born. That's amazing. So I mean, I loved living in Massachusetts and being part of the community for a while. But I think and thankfully I lived there when the Giants beat the Patriots. Sorry, I had to say that. Sorry.
Don't talk.
I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on.
But working in the music business, most of the people that I deal with from the record companies and the managers, they're either in New York or LA. So sports always, it's like, let's get the business out of the way. I literally was on the phone with a record rep this morning who's right at this very moment wearing Islanders underwear and wanting me to know that.
I ain't go that far.
Oh yeah. I'm used to the smack talking, because if I'm not getting it from an East Coast rival, I'm getting it from a West Coast rival. So
I look at it, and and it's because of Matty and some other friends. It's not so much more. I look at it as a rivalry. It's like it's kind of like a fun brother, sister,
Exactly.
or brother back and forth. At this point in my life, I'm not an athlete. I'm not playing for these teams. What do I care?
I just look at it as a way of like being proud of where you're from. Like, I respect the fact that you're an Islanders fan because that's where you grew up. That's the team you grew up. I don't respect Fairweather fans that just buy a Brady's jersey because he wins championships or whatever. It's like, pick your team, grow up with your team, support them, win or lose, stay loyal. I respect that, even if it's a fan of the Jets.
I'm a Giants fan, so it's okay. Obviously, you know that. I said that.
It's not much better.
I know.
It's not.
Whatever. But this is I like that you have great sports knowledge, and obviously, Matty, you do too, because I use that analogy a lot with Guns N' Roses and with bands. Obviously, with the lineup changes, and you probably have seen Axl and company before Slash got back together again. I'm rooting for the band, kind of like I'm rooting for the brand, the jersey, so to speak, even with lineup changes. So to use that kind of transition, what opportunities have you had to interview members of Guns N' Roses, whether it be at AAF? I don't know if you've had anybody on the podcast yet.
Not yet, but I've talked. I haven't spoken to Axl. He's always been notoriously difficult to get access to, especially in radio. But I've spent some really good time with Slash. A couple years ago, before the lockdown, Duff McKagan was on his solo tour. And he was at the City Winery in Boston. And I went down with a camera crew and was able to sit backstage with Duff. He and I had to have talked for over an hour. And as soon as, this is what's crazy, I walk into the room with Duff. And as soon as I walked in the room, he saw the AAF, like, I don't know if it was the mic flag or whatever, and immediately started talking about how AAF was one of the stations that broke Guns N' Roses.
Okay.
And then he remembered it and told me the story about how, there was a station in Canada that helped to break Guns N' Roses, and that AAF was one of those stations in the US that took a flyer on Guns N' Roses and started playing them off the bat and recognized the call letters. And I was like, stop talking. Let me set up the equipment. Actually record this. Cause this was as I walked in the door, I was like, Duff, stop. I want to be able to record this. And then he told me the whole story in the interview, and that interview, and then my Slash interview that he did actually in the studio. We actually set up a couch and like a green screen. The video is for both of those interviews. You can find them on YouTube.
Oh, okay. That's sure.
Yeah,
I know a lot of your stuff
interviews.
on YouTube.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's up there. I mean, I have the audio too, but I always loved AAF was always a very early adopting radio station to technology. I mean, we had a television show back in the mid 90s when Opie and Anthony were there. And then when they were gone and I started, I hosted like 200 and something episodes, and we were doing backstage band interviews and skits and crazy stuff. We were making viral content before that was even a thing.
Right.
And so there's a lot of great old archived content, that's on the internet. But yeah, I've had a chance to talk to those guys, and I've always found them to be gracious and, really nice and sweet. And, as calm as you can be in the center of an F5 tornado, which is what I look at Guns N' Roses as being,
Sure. Well, when was the first time you saw them? Was it through radio or when you were a young mistress?
No, like back, like Matty, like I grew up listening to AAF as a kid because I grew up in the suburbs of Boston. If you lived in the city, you grew up listening to this radio station called WBCN, and WBCN used to make fun of the people that lived in the suburbs. And so if you grew up in the suburbs, you listened to AAF, which was like, the smaller, scrappy younger brother that always was like, one day I'm going to grow up and kick your ass. And then we did.
And we did.
But growing up listening to AAF, you grew up, the AAF was that station that took a chance. So AAF took a chance on Guns N' Roses, where like the quote unquote bigger, more mainstream station like BCN, they broke bands like U2 and stuff. But when it came to like risque bands like a Guns N' Roses in the early days, that's not what BCN did. And so I went and saw, when did I see Guns N' Roses first? The two shows that stick out in my head, well, no, there's 3, 4. I can't even count how many times I've seen them. I remember seeing them at what was the Worcester Centrum, which is now the DCU Center. Soundgarden opened up. And what stuck with me on that was that Soundgarden had an off night. And I walked out of there going, they kind of suck. Like, I don't know if it was just Cornell had a rough voice night, because back in those days, like, you know, that was when those grunge bands were just getting started and they were partying, and it's all documented now. And if you got them on an off night, it was like, God, what was that? And obviously every other time I saw Soundgarden after that, they were brilliant. So I remember that show more so. I still have the shirt, the Guns N' Roses shirt that I got.
Oh, wow.
I have a hoarding problem with my concert shirts.
I think we all do.
I remember seeing the Guns N' Roses Metallica co-headlining stadium tour with Faith No More.
Awesome.
And the show in Massachusetts at what was the old Foxborough Stadium that was torn down, and where Gillette Stadium is now, where the Pats play. It was 5 days after the Montreal riot. So I remember, and I was in like the 10th row on the floor.
Nice.
And you could feel the tension, because people were afraid Axl was going to storm off the stage and another riot was going to happen. And I remember I was sitting in the row with a member of the Patriots, whose name escapes me right now. The dude, he was like an old lineman. He was massive. And I was sitting in like the 10th row, and he was just like, look, if the shit hits the fan, you stick with me. I was like, no problem, dude. But James Hetfield still had his arm in a cast from the burns, from the Montreal, from the pyro fire. And then I saw Guns N' Roses, I believe it was with Buckethead. Like, it was that era, Guns N' Roses. And I actually took Corey Taylor from Slipknot and Stone Sour, and he and I went to that show together.
Oh, wow.
And we were sitting in like the 10th or 11th row at the Boston Garden. And it was one of those shows where Axl was notoriously tardy. And Corey and I sat there for hours waiting for the show, and like, we're getting more and more pissed off as it went. And Corey Taylor at one point went on like a storyteller's acoustic tour. And if you go and you dig on YouTube, you can find the show on that tour that he played the Middle East in Cambridge, Mass.
Okay. I've been there.
One of the stories he told in this storyteller's thing was the night he was sitting around waiting for Axl to come on stage. And I was the person with him at the show. And I was at the Middle East that night, and he was pointing at me in the crowd. Like, he was like, she's here somewhere. I was with you, and told this really funny story. And then obviously I was at the big triumphant reunion shows that happened before the lockdown. So I've seen him a bunch of times, that off the top of my head, in all of the different incarnations. There's always a story. It's like there isn't a Guns N' Roses show that you're like, I don't really remember. It was like, there's always something that happened at the GN'R show.
That's why they're perfect for our podcast.
Yeah.
So
Carrie,
Matt, what's your story, Matt?
So my Guns N' Roses adjacent story related to you was actually the Velvet Revolver show at the Worcester Centrum Center. I got it right here. It's actually November 9th, 2004, one of the last shows before it became the DCU Center. And I had been working at AAF for maybe a month at most. And somehow I think Adam Ralston gave me tickets, said, hey, nobody picked these up. You go watch the show. And I was, just leave in time to go hand out stickers afterwards. Okay, great. So I get to my seats, and they're right next to the stage. And about 10 minutes later, I see, you, him, and all these other like big wig VIP type people, I don't know who you were bringing to the show, walk in, and you're sitting like 10 rows behind me. And he looks down at me, and he looks at his seats, and he was pissed. How did you get in front of me? So my story is, I was a street teamer, and I sat close to the stage.
That story proves one thing that I think is very important, is that you said you were sitting in a listener's seats and they didn't pick up their tickets and you got to use them. And that shows that we didn't hoard the good tickets and give the listeners the shit tickets. We always gave the listeners the best tickets that were available. So when you won tickets from AAF, you got the best tickets we could give you. And you just proved that story.
Exactly. And the one memorable thing from that night for me anyway was, before the show started, guys from like Real World were walking up and down the aisle. It's like a section over from us. And I was like, this is the Real World Boston.
Yeah, that was the Real World Boston year. Yeah. And everybody, like, there were so many cities and it was like, oh, the Real World, whatever. As soon as like the massholes found out where the Real World was, they were like, fuck you guys. Like, throwing stuff, constantly screaming at them outside the custom firehouse that they redid for the show. Yeah. A lot of cities would be proud to have like a Real World cast, and Boston was like, fuck you guys, get out of town. Don't watch your bullshit here.
That's why I mean, Boston and New York are friends. As much as we might fight, I mean, we're
We're
the same way.
kindred spirits for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. You know what? Speaking of Velvet Revolver, did you ever get a chance, an opportunity to speak with Scott Weiland?
A couple times. So I have a picture of me with Scott in the old AAF studio that was on Huntington Ave. So that was because they came in, Stone Temple Pilots came in and played acoustic in the studio. The performance is fantastic. But I got a picture with Scott, and I believe it's Dean DeLeo. The three of us are in the photo. And then when Velvet Revolver played, they played, I believe the show was at the House of Blues. And I think they played back-to-back shows or something. And they had played the night before the interview. And Scott Weiland had gone off about some big political rant about like the Iraq war or like something like that. And he was supposed to call my show the next day, and he called super late. And when we finally started talking, I kind of asked him about like the political, not so much political, but more like military political based content that he was like talking about, the statements he was making on stage. Because anybody that's ever known anything about me is that one of the things that I'm the most passionate about is supporting our veteran community and our military community. And I get very upset when our military is politicized, because I have a lot of friends that enlisted in the military or were commissioned into the military in one, era, when one political party, in one administration. Like the way I look at it is our military signs a blank check. And that check gets passed around. And then it's like Russian roulette, like somebody gets to cash it eventually. The military is not in control of it. So whatever the administration is, whatever their political views are, whatever party is in place, they're not always going to be there. And so politicizing our actual military members upsets me, because they are supposed to be apolitical. They're just doing whatever our elected officials get them to do. Right. So if you want to be upset about what the military's doing, be upset with the government that sent them there, not with the troops themselves. And so as Scott and I were talking, I had just got, this had to have been like 2007 maybe, because I got embedded as a journalist in Iraq in 2006. And so when I brought up that embed experience and was trying to tell him some of the things he had heard about what our troops were doing wasn't actually true, because I had just been there, he went off on me about like, this is what's wrong with our media, and basically insinuated that I was like fucking Paris Hilton, like making a reality show in Iraq. And we got into it, and I was like, fuck that. I know he was in the throes of addiction. I know that, when you're dealing with somebody that's battling addiction, that you're not always dealing with them in their true self.
Right.
And I also know that it's possible for somebody to just have a bad day. Right.
Yeah.
But that became a very famous, when people ask me the question of like, who is the biggest asshole you've ever met, or like whatever, I've only had issues with 2 rock stars in my entire career. And that Scott Weiland interview was one of them. But the time I had met him before at the radio station, when we took the picture and stuff, he couldn't have been nicer. But I believe he had just gotten out of rehab then and was sober and was really nice and whatever. So the only time I had access to Weiland during the Velvet Revolver era did not go well.
To say the least.
That did not go well.
They always say on, I know what you do is fantastic, and I was going to bring that up before we wrapped up today, what you do for the troops and supporting the troops, and having gone over there, putting your money where your mouth is, kind of, so to speak. But they say on the radio all the time, don't talk religion and politics, because you just never know. But you have that experience.
I mean, the thing is, especially in this political climate that we're all living in, it's like, it's absolutely fine. Like, if that's what the great thing about the United States is that you can have those opinions, right?
Yeah.
And that you can say what you want. And my whole thing was, part of the reason why I wanted to go overseas was that I had been hearing things in the news, that the troops weren't trained, that they were baby killers, that it was like, and looking back, even my early opinions about the Iraq war, have obviously changed with education. the political side, the arguments about going to war. I was never wrong in supporting our troops by any stretch of the imagination. However, after 9/11, everybody was really emotional and looking for revenge and looking to blame somebody. And the Iraq war was a perfectly timed thing. And we've all learned, 2020 hindsight, that maybe some of the things we were all told weren't true and all of those things. And now I'm better informed. And obviously the world we're living in now, it's like, who can you trust and what news can you trust? But when someone says something I know to be blatantly false, not because I heard about it on another news channel, but because I actually watched it with my own eyes, that's when I kind of go, okay, look, if you're going to make me have this conversation, then I'm going to bust out some facts, because this is what I actually saw. And I've done that with my trip to Iraq, and I've also done it with my trip to Afghanistan. It's like, maybe what I saw wasn't happening everywhere, but I can tell you what I saw with my own eyes when I was there, and what you're saying in this moment about what was going on over there is false. And this is why. This is what I experienced. And I live my life a lot that way, which is the put up or shut up, put your money where your mouth is. I would rather see it for myself so I can speak from experience than just believe what somebody else said. Sometimes as a woman, people call that bitchy, which I wear as a badge of honor and love that. So bring it on. Call me a bitch, please. But yeah, when you bring up Weiland, that's the only thing. And I love his music so much.
Who's the other guest? I have to ask.
Who's the other guest? That's what we want to know.
Dave Navarro.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, he was the only other one. We got into it a little bit. He was working on another band, one of this small side project. And he came in the studio, he was super late, and he came in the studio and he lit up a cigarette in the studio. And we had this state of the art halon system, and I'm the daughter of a career firefighter. And I'm like, dude, that if you smoke in here, that shit's going to fall out of the ceiling and it's going to snuff the fire and we're going to fucking suffocate. And I was like, just so you know, I'm closer to the door. I'm getting out. If you die in here, not my problem, bro. You can't smoke. Who thinks you can walk into an on-air studio? I know you're trying to be all rock star but don't fucking smoke in here. You'll die.
You can wait, go outside, take a 5.
And you're 3 hours late for the interview. You couldn't have a cigarette in the last 3 hours. And it was not, it didn't start off great. But other than that, I've never had, as bitchy as people think I am, I go out of I'm not. I just have strong opinions and I don't take anybody's shit. And when you're a guy, you get applauded for that. When you're a woman, they call you bitchy. So that's why I embrace the term. It's just call me a fucking bitch. I don't care.
You're a masshole.
Yeah. And because I'm from Boston, it's even people from around the rest of the country think we're a little too abrasive. And it's that's just how we are. But I go out of my way and always have to make the artist comfortable, not because I look at them and put them on a pedestal as being a rock star. It's actually the exact opposite. It's that I realize, because I was a touring roadie before I was on the air, I understand how hard touring can be. Waking up in a different city, sleeping on an uncomfortable bed, not getting enough rest, eating shitty food, just the long nights of traveling, and when you don't feel good I understand what that's like. And so I have always tried to make the artist as comfortable as possible when they come in my studio and come on my show. And I have such respect for songwriting and musicianship, because I don't have it myself, that I go out of my way to try and make them comfortable. And because I do those little things, it always really sets the tone for a great start to an interview with an artist, because they see that I actually care about their comfort. I make sure I know how they like their coffee. I make sure, if there was ever a band that came in to play acoustic in the studio, I always had room temperature water for the lead singer, because singers shouldn't drink cold water. It's bad for their vocal cords. And so there's all these little things that I always paid attention to make the artist comfortable. And so when people ask me that question about, who was the biggest assholes, it's the list is super short, because even the biggest of rock stars who you would rationalize being able to be the asshole were always incredibly gracious because I took the 5 seconds to try and make
You're
them
setting the
comfortable.
tone,
Yeah.
which is what I try to do
realize
the
that
same
their
thing.
time is valuable, and
Yes.
thank them for the generosity of their time.
I'm the same way. Just before we started recording, just with you, I wanted you to feel comfortable, and even with Matt, even though I've known him for decades at this point, that's because you're going to get a better conversation. You're going to get more honest answers, because there are too many interviewers out there, especially in the world of podcasting. That there's so many out there that want the clickbaity story or the scoop.
Yeah.
So if you ever, to tie back to GN'R, if you ever hang out with Duff again for an hour, can you tell him that I'm harmless? I was supposed to interview him on that tour as well, the Tenderness, and then management was canceled it on me, thinking I would just talk to him about Guns N' Roses.
Well, that's one of the things, is that what I've noticed is that when members of Guns N' Roses aren't doing something Guns N' Roses related, especially, I have Slash on tape saying that the band would never get back together.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And then when I had a chance to hear, I was like, you lied to me, but it's like, I also understand that it's got to be really hard to live in your own shadow, right? Like, look at somebody like Robert Plant that gets asked that is Led Zeppelin going to get back together a billion times, even though he's answered the question. And it's for good reason, is that he's gotten older. His voice doesn't do what 20-something Robert Plant can do, and he can't compete with his former self. So I have appreciation for how annoying that must be to be someone like Slash or someone like Duff, and be really proud of this new thing that you've created on your own. It would be like if I had a contentious separation with WAAF and then I launched my own thing and all you want to talk to me about is AAF. And I'm like, dude, like, I'm doing other things. I appreciate that you want to talk about whatever I'm doing, but like, so I understand where that comes from. But at the same time, it's like, if you're coming at it from a fan perspective, I can see it from your side of the coin too. It just, I have sympathy and empathy for them, because I know how much that must suck,
But here's the thing, because you came with the background. I mean, the famous Mistress Carrie, WAF. You're safe. I know, air quotes, sure.
Yeah.
But with me, I'm like, I will sign a contract that says I will not talk about Guns N' Roses. I will talk to Slash for an hour about horror. I will talk to Duff about the Seattle Supersonics. It's just the name of my podcast, because Brando isn't as sexy as Mistress Carrie, so I need a little bit of a hook.
Listen, I didn't even give myself that name. The listeners gave it to me, and I just took it and ran with it.
Oh,
and when it came to naming my podcast, it's like, what the fuck else was I going to name it?
Oh, that's okay. And Matty, are we going to lose you? Because you just texted me your battery's going to die.
You might. Yeah, I'm trying to not like shuffle around here to plug myself in. So if I disappear, that's why.
Okay, fair enough. Well,
battery isn't as good as I thought. All right, I'll be back. I'll be here. Don't worry.
No, that's all right. And we're not going to keep. I guess he's going to pause anyway.
Just plug it in.
No, because I also want to talk to you, about like advice with that, because I had this in I brought up the example with Tommy Stinson before, when I had the opportunity a few times to interview him. And they've had interviewers promise, we're not going to talk about the Replacements. We're not going to talk about Guns N' Roses, or maybe we will a little bit, but that's all they focus on. I don't do that. Like, I know at first glance you see all GN'R stuff around you, but again, I don't have, maybe I should dye my beard purple just to stand out.
I'll just tell you, buy black towels, man, because it gets everywhere.
My fiance, she just dyed her hair purple as well. But she's like, oh, it's so purple. I'm like, it's purple highlights.
Get a black pillowcase, because it'll ruin your sheets if you don't. Just buy a black pillowcase.
I showed her your picture. I'm like, no, this is really purple. You have purple highlights, which looks great. But there's such thing as like,
I dove in the purple pool head first. And I've been there a long time. Actually, this October will be the 30th anniversary of me dyeing my hair purple. It's been purple for 30 years.
That's incredible.
And it's been cool and uncool and cool and uncool like a dozen times since then. I just don't care.
Right? I feel like it's
congratulations on getting engaged, by the way. I didn't have a chance during your intro to congratulate you. And
that's all right. I guess as MattyB joins us again, I just remember thinking when we were, in our early 20s starting out on the radio, I'm like, All I want is a full-time radio job and a girl who loves and puts up with me. And that's what happened.
It's what all of us could hope for. And Matty, congratulations on being a dad.
Thank you.
I didn't know. I made Mistress Carrie baby onesies, dude. So I got.
Oh, I remember seeing those. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to.
He's getting big. He's a bundle. That's for
how
sure.
old is he?
He'll be 6 months. No, I don't know. It's a blur. Carrie. He was born in February. He was born on Super Bowl Sunday during the Super Bowl.
Oh, so I have baby onesies that say "Made in Lockdown 2020." You need a lockdown baby onesie. I'm going to send you.
All right, great.
That's funny.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
You have a lot of great merch, right? It's not. Was it mistresscarrie.com?
Yeah, my website's mistresscarrie.com, and it's been, one of the things that AAF was always really good at was marketing and the creative evil geniuses that we worked with all of those years. I learned a lot about marketing, and I took a lot of that with me. And one of the things I wanted to do was to be able to get new artwork and logos made. And I've had a really good time being able to kind of control the merch that I create, and to be able to like have the regular stuff that you would expect, like t-shirts and hoodies and that kind of stuff, but to like make. I have baby onesies that say "My mom rocks like Mistress Carrie." You know what I mean? Like stuff like that is just super fun. And now if I get like a stupid idea about something, I don't have a boss telling me I can't do it. I just make them.
Yeah.
So it's been really cool.
Beauty of podcasting. Let me get predictions from both of you as concerts are finally, returning. I mean, this is just incredible. I still have my Guns N' Roses ticket from when they canceled last year that was rescheduled for MetLife Stadium. Unfortunately, I was hoping to go to Chicago to see them, but the dates they came out, it's not going to line up with the week I'm going to Chicago just for regular vacation.
Come to Boston. The show's August 3rd at Fenway?
Here, the thing, if Matty, who just dropped off, maybe if he goes, because my fiance, we get along with a lot of things, but her Guns N' Roses, like her favorite band is Dave Matthews. So she's like seeing Dave Matthews all around the country.
My husband's a country music fan, so trust me, I feel your pain, man.
Wow, okay. All right. I was like, is something wrong? We meet together on the Beatles, but that's interesting that you have a country music.
Yeah, it's really funny. We met on a blind date, and he didn't grow up in New England, so he had no idea who I was or what I did, and it's actually kind of nice to like have somebody that loves you, not because of what you do for a living or like, I mean, he appreciates what I do and he's incredibly supportive, but I have to put up with his shitty taste in music.
Okay.
Brutal, man. It's brutal.
I feel your pain. So, I may go to Fenway, but I usually don't go to concerts by myself. So I have to find somebody to go with this time. Maybe AC, maybe Pennsylvania. But anyway, the prediction is with Guns N' Roses finally coming back and it's the reunion's been going on for 5 years. Are they going to release new music?
Yes, 100%. 100%.
Oh, wow. I didn't even get my question out and you already came out with it 100%. What makes you so confident?
It's the same thing that made me so confident that they would get back together and do a reunion tour.
Really? You were all into that too.
I always said it would happen. Said it would happen with Soundgarden. There are very few exceptions of bands that have been thrown money that have turned it down. Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and ABBA. To my knowledge, ABBA turned down the most money, believe it or not. Other than those exceptions, I have a lot of faith that at some point, any band will get offered enough money that outweighs the hate they have for each other.
I guess thought they were offered a lot of money throughout the years. And then
but it depends on they need it at the time. That's the thing, is that you always find out how good they were with their money, because obviously a band like Guns N' Roses, a band like Led Zeppelin, a band like Pink Floyd, they're going to get a certain amount of fuck you money that just comes in the mail from the residuals and the airplay of all of their old catalog and stuff. That money's always going to come in. But the more money you have, the more problems you get, the famous more money, more problems. Exactly. And the streets are lined with bad investments. And there are a lot, just like with athletes, you get this flood of cash early and it's possible to make a lot of really bad business decisions. And you can spend a lot of time of your life trying to dig out of those holes. Look at all of us, right? Like, look at the bailout checks that everybody got. Most people went and spent it on bullshit. Well, imagine you get a $10 million royalty check for Appetite for Destruction. You're not going to invest all of it. And if you did, you're going to invest it in some stuff that doesn't pan out. So I always have faith that at some point down the road, a band is going to go, you know what? Now I'm just being selfish because now I'm denying future generations of my own family financial security by not wanting to do this tour or not wanting to do this record. And so I just have faith that I think Guns N' Roses getting back together and doing that reunion tour and selling out stadiums from the jump and having the tour be critically acclaimed, the fans loving it. And I think all those years later, I can't speak for what it took behind the scenes to negotiate getting the tour to happen. I'm sure it wasn't easy because everybody's got their own managers and whatever.
Sure.
But the fact that it went off virtually without a hitch, at least that any of us knew about, it's got to be fulfilling to get that albatross of what could have been off all of their backs, Axl included. And you can't tell me they haven't been inspired musically by what's gone on with Guns N' Roses in the last 5 years. And to be able, especially over the last year, to not be able to do anything else besides throw around song ideas.
I hope that's.
I don't want to bet my house, but I would go to Vegas and bet my house that we're going to get new Guns N' Roses music. I would say probably within the next, I'm not going to say tomorrow, but I would say within the next 12 to 18 months, maybe. I bet we get it in 2022.
Okay.
Maybe by the end of this year, we could get a song. Now, whether it's a record, whether it's a song off a soundtrack for a movie.
That's another story.
I'm not saying, we're going to get a brand new record full of original Guns N' Roses stuff. Maybe it's, archived old stuff with one new track on it. Like I find it very hard to believe that they are not in some kind of creative space, that they're not making new music that they're going to want to release.
Okay. Hopefully it is. We'll see what comes first, whether you can play that new music on a podcast or they actually just release it.
I bet Guns N' Roses releases new music before you can play a full song on a podcast. That would be my prediction.
Okay.
My somewhat educated prediction, but that's my prediction.
Okay. And MattyB, I can see or not see that he's diligently trying to find the lost Guns N' Roses song.
I'm actively working on it. You just can't see it.
No, I know. It was so funny. I guess I remember working on Cape Cod with Matty, and that was when all the Guns N' Roses leaks were coming out, and we're hearing it before Chinese Democracy came out. And,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, all these years later, again, not just to do radio with Matty, my friend, but to speak with you, Carrie, is just, I've wanted to for a long time. It's just a fan, but just to talk.
I appreciate it. And I know how the podcasting world is. And it's like when you let somebody on your show, it's like you're letting them into your house, right? That you're like inviting somebody into your space. And so I'm very grateful that, you asked me to come on, and I thought it was really cool. So I appreciate the open invite and the hospitality.
Right on. And just be aware because of the email, because I was like, I haven't heard from Mistress Carrie. I'm like, did she reject me from an interview? It goes to spam. And when you look at, it's one of those emails that whenever you write a response, it goes all the way to the bottom.
Yeah, it's my email. I'm working on my email system, man. Okay. I'm working on it. I've had to learn a lot of tech stuff in the last year since my first email address ever was a WAF email address.
Oh.
So, building everything myself and launching, my website and the podcast and building a studio, the learning curve for the technology, the behind the scenes stuff has been interesting. And I'm still trying to figure out why my email did that to you. So I'm sorry.
Well, I'm glad I looked at spam to make this happen. So
I'm glad you did too.
Thank you so much. Of course, the Mistress Carrie podcast. You are officially on the Pike now, Afternoon Drive.
I am. So about 6 weeks ago now or so, I got hired by Westwood One.
Great.
and they have welcomed me on their 24/7 channels. So I'm on the air on what they call their Rock 2.0 channel and their CRX channel. So I'm doing some new rock radio and then some classic rock radio. And then once I got hired at Westwood One, who's owned by Cumulus, and Cumulus Media owns the Pike. Once that all happened and I kind of got welcomed into the building, they were like, "Hey, you got Mistress Carrie on the payroll? Because we'd really like to have her on the air over here too." And so I kind of got passed around a little bit in the company. So I do afternoons 3 to 7 on 100 FM, the Pike in Worcester. And then I'm also doing afternoons 3 to 8 for the Westwood One 24/7 channels too. So it's awesome. I'm loving being able to be back on the radio because it's my first love. And even though I love podcasting and I definitely see the future in it and absolutely love it, I love radio and still value it as a medium and a form of communication with the audience. And so to be able to do both has been awesome. And I'm so grateful to Westwood One and Cumulus for, allowing me to turn their microphones on every day again. It's nice.
Well, I was really happy to read that because as I finally get to meet you, I can verify my thoughts that you're one of the good ones, because radio is a tough business. So I was glad to see you, rise like a phoenix.
Oh, come on. With all the shit that Matty talked about me when I wasn't around. No, I'm just kidding.
Brando, I know you're trying to wrap up, but can I share a couple quick of my favorite Mistress Carrie?
Oh, I want to hear these.
Yeah,
Well,
please do.
These are they're not. So one thing that I want the listeners to know, but before I get to that, you said, we talk about bad experiences before with people. I was actually in studio with you when you were interviewing Breaking Benjamin once, and you asked the lead singer if he was spraying something in his throat. He was like, "Oh, I spray this in my throat so that it stays healthy and all that." And you're like, "Oh, what is it? Can I give it a try?" And he's like, "No, no, you can't try it." And he was like, I remember the look on his face. He was offended that you even asked.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that.
He also got mad because he has a fear of flying.
Oh, that's right.
And we talked about, because I'm a skydiver. So the idea of being afraid to get on an airplane it doesn't compute with me. And I understand Travis Barker being afraid to fly because he fucking lived through a plane crash.
Yeah.
But I have a hard time kind of wrapping my head around being afraid to fly when you're afraid of the crash before it happens. You know what I mean? So we got it. I think he got a little annoyed with me because I was like, "You're really afraid to fly?" And I was like, "Why doesn't the band just drug you and put you on the plane?"
Mr. T, right? Put it in the milk.
Yeah. And, but those little banter things back and forth,
That's funny.
I would never say, "Oh yeah, he's an asshole." Cause he wasn't. It was just you're bound to ask a question. And I really like the freedom of being able to ask an off the cuff question. Like, "Can I try that spray that you use for your throat?"
Yeah.
It's not part of the planned interview, but if you're going to pull it out and spray it while you're on the air with me, of course I'm going to talk about it. So that's funny that you remember that because I didn't even remember it until you said it.
Yeah, it's the little things that you remember as like a fan looking in, even though you're inside, you're not even looking and you're already inside. And Brando, I know it's a Guns N' Roses podcast, and I always ask people about non-Guns N' Roses related questions, and then I promise it's the last one. But this is probably, and maybe I'm misremembering this a little bit, and but this is what I believe to be true, so it is. I believe that Mistress Carrie by the way, WAF is responsible for the record label re-releasing Shinedown's debut album.
Well, that's 100% true. That's not a speculation. That's 100% true.
And it was all because of their cover of Simple Man. They played it on
100%.
as like, "Oh, we just kind of noodle on this song during sound check." They played it on air on the radio, and that night they were opening for Nickelback or something, weren't they? Coming in, they weren't even the headline band. It was their debut album. They were touring in support of that, and the crowd showed up screaming for Simple Man all night. And the AAF was playing that as the single, the acoustic that they were playing in studio, and they actually had the band go back in, re-record some songs, an acoustic version. They included Simple Man, and then they re-released the album
Wow.
Well, I'll tell you what happened, because part of what you're saying is true and part of it's not. So back then, Shinedown was that band that like ended up opening for everybody. And so they would jump on a tour, come through Boston, jump on another tour, come through Boston like 2 months later. So they became almost this de facto house band.
Yeah.
And they came up on my show and they were like, we've played every song that we know how to play acoustic on your show already. And so I have the audio of talking them into playing Simple Man. And because they were from Jacksonville, Lynyrd Skynyrd is the hometown hero band. So they were afraid of like screwing it up or whatever. So what happened was they played it. It was amazing.
It was.
They left town. We put the song up on our website because people wouldn't stop calling. We were playing it like every 2 hours and people were still calling about it. About 6 weeks later, the band came back through town on a different tour and came back to the studio. And I have the audio because I asked our web guy to pull the number of streams that the song had received in like the 6 weeks since they had recorded it in the studio. And it was almost 500,000 plays in 6 weeks that it had been played off of our website. And the record rep who was in the studio, because I gave out the number live on the air, and the band, I have the audio on the band was like 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. I was like, keep going. And when I told him it was like 426,000 something times, the record rep walked out of the studio and called New York and was like, hold on a second. So we offered our recording to the record rep for them to put it on the record. But we asked that they credit WAF on the album. And the label, and I'm not trying to motherfuck the label. This is just what happened. They were afraid of, there were certain bands that AAF was just so responsible. You know what I mean? Like a Godsmack, for example. Yeah. And there was always this feeling like we'll never be able to broaden the band on any other station in town or whatever, because AAF is just always going to own them. And so the label, I think, was very nervous about Shinedown becoming like an AAF quote unquote owned band. And so they didn't want AAF to like be in the liner notes of the record. So they told the band to go back in and re-record the song and put that version on it. And the band knows how I feel that our version of Simple Man is far superior because it was raw and it was in the moment and spontaneous. And there's so much soul in it that it's perfect. Even though there's a slight imperfection here or there, it is perfect. And a couple of years ago, before the lockdown, they were co-headlining with Godsmack. And you can look this video up on YouTube too. They sold out the Xfinity Center. It was like 28,000 people. And Zach Myers and Brent Smith played the song out in the crowd and called me up on stage and had the whole sold out crowd sing the song to me. And I burst into tears because I was so proud of them for becoming this band that they are today, like playing in arenas. Like I always saw that. That's one of the things I love about what I do is that I saw that band and was like, this band's going to be huge because they're just great guys and they're super talented and they write great songs. And to see them become what I always imagined they could be, it's like, it sounds condescending and like I'm a fucking mom, but that's not how I mean it to be. It's just when you say you're proud of someone, it comes from a genuine place. And I'm just so proud of what they've become. And I'm also really proud of the fact that WAF affected the careers of so many bands and that I had a small part in some of that. Like if there's a legacy of the rock station, of WAF that is going to be in the history books, I hope that that's what we're remembered for, is that we gave people a chance. It's what they did for me. It's what they did for Opie and Anthony. It's what they did for so many of those bands. And it's like they took a chance on things that weren't proven just because they thought it was good. And I love that. And I hope that I can do that continuing forward in my radio career and with the podcast, is opening it up to smaller bands too, to see if we can get them to become rock stars someday.
I think so. I mean,
I hope so.
From Guns N' Roses to Shinedown, I think there's a good track record.
Yeah, we got a
there.
pretty good track record. AAF was pretty good about that stuff, and I just
continuing
love
it.
music so much that especially with rock, I'm really excited to see what the next generation of rock bands, those great rock bands, who they're going to be and where they're going to come from. And I don't subscribe to the idea that rock is dead. I don't at all. I think it's
one song in the country right now is a rock influenced song. Olivia Rodrigo. I forget the name of it, but it sounds like something that Paramore might have done. It's not, your classic rock, but it's kids like rock. Ozzy just did stuff with Post Malone. I mean, rock isn't dead. It's
the number one rock song right now is Mercy from Aaron Jones. And I had him on my podcast last year. And I was like, I told the label, I want to help make this guy huge. And he is genuine and wonderful and incredibly talented. And this amazing combination of hip hop and grunge and blues. And if you don't know who Aaron Jones is, go and listen to him. He's amazing.
So, I don't know, so I'm going to go listen.
Really? You don't? Oh, you got to go check out Aaron Jones. His record just came out. It's called Child of the State. He was discovered by Sir Mix-a-Lot in Seattle.
Nice. You sold me. You have me sold.
And he is this incredible blues bass. Like, imagine like Gary Clark Jr. and grunge and a little hip hop, and like he's an amazing artist, and he is a wonderfully talented guy, and he's a nice guy. And he is one of the things that I look at rock and roll and go, rock and roll is fine. Rock and roll has got a very bright future. If we got artists like Aaron Jones coming out, he's great.
And also, because I had mentioned this, Wolfgang Van Halen opening for Guns N' Roses. I think that's what a home run that is. I mean, I can't wait to see how his career goes. I mean, he obviously has the talent.
Talk about having everybody would think, oh, it's got to be great to be Eddie Van Halen's kid, right? And in a lot of ways, absolutely, right? But it's got to be hard when your passion, when you get that musical gene, right? Because there's so many second, third generation musicians, and to grow up with your dad not just being a guitar player or being in a famous band, but being a pillar in the pantheon of rock and roll, to being the GOAT, and to have to find a way to find your own sunshine and to define yourself as an artist in your own right. That has got to be really hard. Sure. And he's doing that. And I am impressed, and the music is good. I can't wait to see him do it live. I mean, I saw him play with Van Halen, but I want to see him with his own band, with his own music that he wrote. And I think it's awesome. And the announcement about the Guns N' Roses tour, I was like, what a home run.
That was the phrase I used.
Home run for him.
Home run.
Yep.
That's exactly what I said.
Yep.
I put out a request. Hopefully I'll get Wolfgang Van Halen on the podcast. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I put the request in as well. So we'll see what happens.
Mistress Carrie, you're higher on the totem pole than me. So hopefully there's some Wolfgang stories left over.
We'll see. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, that's one of the hard things about what we do. You know. You talk to somebody that talks for a living, and you got to find a way to make it fresh, which is why some people, like you said, fall into that trap of just trying to get the clickbait, controversy, like the one little soundbite that's going to get, wind on Twitter or whatever. But I think, we're all coming at it from a different perspective when it comes to our love of music. And my interview style and the questions I'm going to ask are going to be totally different than yours. And that's what makes all of the podcasts and all of the interviews awesome, is that we all bring something else to the table.
Exactly. Well, I look forward to hearing that when it does.
I hope it happens. Fingers crossed. I hope yours do too.
Thank you. Matty, anything else? You're obviously still rocking Cape Cod's Rock, Pixie 103. I can't say it normally. I have to say it like
you have to put on your yuck voice a little bit there.
Yeah. It's Cape Cod's Rock. 102.3.
No, still alive and kicking, doing it out here on the Cape. And
awesome.
I don't know if anybody's going to listen because of it, but if you want to, we got a free app for your iPhone and Android, blah, 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 blah. Amazon, Alexa, et cetera, et cetera.
Get the plugs in any way you can, dude.
I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to be able to catch up with you, Carrie.
It was great to see you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We could see you.
I could see you, but I know you're doing well, and you're a dad, and that's awesome. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. So Brando, I'm good.
Awesome. Thanks, Matty, and obviously thank you, Carrie. And thanks everybody for hanging
out. Wedding.
Oh yeah, I'll get you to DJ the wedding.
Yeah, I could. I just got married myself, so I'm a newlywed too. So
Congratulations.
come on in. The water's fine, dude. It's all
Mazel tov.
good.
Gotcha. So when am I gonna get married? When is Mistress Julia gonna Mrs. Julia? I had totally I went all episode without making that mistake. Mistress Carrie. When is she gonna interview Wolfgang Van Halen? The same thing what Axl Rose once said about Chinese democracy. When are you gonna see it?
When you see it.
Well, soon is the word.
Yeah.